Hi everybody. I want to give you a quick introduction to some software that I've created called MidiPaw, which I'll bring up. MidiPaw is an application which is meant to tie together a leap motion controller right there, with virtual instruments that you might be playing in your digital audio workstation via MIDI. It sends MIDI continuous controller type messages and lets you control the expressions on those kind of instruments. So I'll show it to you in action in just a minute or two. But by way of explanation first, I just want to explain it works on the concept of performance rules. So I'll add a rule here. Basically, you can name the rule and a few controls here, but essentially you pick the motion that you're interested in controlling some aspect of your instrument. There's a number that you can pick from. I just pick left and right for now, and you pick the MIDI message that's going to be sent. It can send pitch bends, something called an articulation stack, which I'll show you soon, as well as the standard sort of CC numbered messages that you use to correspond to the aspect of the instrument that you want to control. And if I put my hand above the leap motion, you can see right away it's begun tracking my motion here. So this is the level of CC message that would be sent corresponding to my movement. Within each of these rules, there's some additional control that's available. You can clamp the responsiveness to a particular part of the motion range. Now I'm just using a little bit of the range. You can reverse the interpretation of the movement. Now it's opposite. You can also set the response curve that's being used. There's various curves that are used to control how the motion is translated into the bar. So here it gets quicker towards the end as I move. It's ramping up. And you can also create some stabilization, which causes this bar to lag slightly behind the actual movement because it's being stabilized a little bit. So when you want to control an instrument in multiple moves, you just add additional rules until you've got basically a patch set up the way you like it. You can then save it as a preset and control your instrument next time in the same way. And that's about it for the explanation. Now I'll show you how to use it. So to show you this in motion with a real instrument, I'll bring up one that I like. This is a trumpet. It's the Aaron Venture Infinite Brass Trumpet. It's a nice solo trumpet that I like that has a lot of articulation control that's available to it. And I've made a preset for this one, which I'll bring up. But I'm going to mute two of the controls for now, leaving just these three at the top. There's dynamics, which is sending a mod wheel on the left and right, and then there's a couple of vibrato controls that are rules that I've added as well. So you can see I've got my hand over there and I'm moving, which is controlling the dynamics here according to there. And you can see it's pretty much in lockstep. There's very little lag. Can't really perceive it at all in what's being controlled there. So if you're going to control with just that, I'll show you what that sounds like. I'll start in the middle. So kind of like that, which you can do with the mod wheel anyway. So it's not a lot different, but it's controlling it in a different manner. A couple of other rules though that we're not using there. There's the vibrato and the vibrato rate. So vibrato is on a twist. So if we look at vibrato depth here and I twist my hand, we can see that it's picking up the twist and controlling vibrato. And the rate is on a back and forth motion. So as I move my hand forwards and backwards, the vibrato rate is also going up and down. In both of these cases, I have the responsiveness clamped in a certain way, just to be comfortable with the amount of movement that I feel is appropriate for this particular one. So when you play with all of those three, I'll show you how that sounds a little bit different. So you get a little bit more natural flow to the playing with the addition of that vibrato piece. And you can take it a little bit further. There's a kind of a fun growl capability that's in this trumpet that I like. So that's on an open grab movement. So I'll unmute this one, so it's now being sent, and you can see the growl parameter here. And as I make a fist, the growl is coming up. So if you play something with all of those in play, let's see if I can manage them all. We'll give it a shot. So get a little bit of a bite into the sound with that, and you can take it even a little bit over the top. This is probably too much, but I'll add the expression, which is up and down, and I've got it set to be just the top of the volume range, and it's a little too damped there. You know what? Let me change that, and I'll reduce the stabilization on that one. There, so it's a little bit more responsive. And now I've got all of those in there at once. So as I go to the top right, the volume and dynamics are high. Lower left, they're at the lowest that they're going to be for this particular setting. So I'll sort of try with that and see how we do. That wasn't bad at all. So it's an interesting way to play. You get a little bit more control than you could do with simultaneous sliders or faders or anything. Um, and that's about it. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and I'll show you some other instruments in a moment. So that trumpet had a fair number of parameters being controlled at the same time. You can also use it in a little bit more of a subtle way, I guess. This is an example of another instrument that I like by Orange Tree Samples. It's the Evolution Hollow Body Blues, and I have it loaded with a very straightforward sound. It's kind of a straightforward guitar, and I've got a preset here that I've called Expressive Guitar. This takes all the motion on the left and right side. So if I open this up, you can see that the motion range here is clamped to the beginning part of the motion, and it's sending just a very small bit of the CC message. In this case, we're using a pitch bend. So it sends just a tiny bit. And I use that by basically wiggling my hand, and I can get some vibrato on the bend. The next rule, vibrato volume. This is not actually realistic. A guitar player volume doesn't actually move with vibrato, but it does accentuate the effect. So I've got a little bit of a wiggle on the volume right there, resulting from hand motion. And then finally, there's some big bend that happens kind of later in the range, and we can show you that in a moment. So if I play just with the vibrato, I'll do a note without, and then I'll do a note with. So you can hear without, with. So you can use that for a little bit of vibrato realism as you play. Well, let's give it a shot. So not bad. It's an improvement over what we had, but we're not using the bend parameter, which is kind of the fun one. We'll try that. So the last thing I wanted to show was the articulation stacks. For this one, I'm going to use Session Strings Pro, where I have loaded just a few articulations, legato, accent, and spiccato into these keys. And I'm going to just build this rule from scratch. It's quite simple. So I'll create a performance rule. I'll give it the name artic. And I want this to be on an up and down motion. So I will do that, and I will select my MIDI message will be an articulation stack. And when I do that, I get this window changes to a place where I can actually edit articulations. And I'm going to add 3 to correspond with the instrument. So I will create one here called legato, and I know that it's on C0. I will create accent, which I know is on D0. And finally, I will create spiccato on E0. So in the background, you can see what's happened is I've now got a stack with those articulations on them, and I can use my hand moving up and down to change that. And as I do that, the articulation key switches are being sent, and the instrument's changing to the different articulations. So playing just with that, you can change the sound as you go. So a good way to switch between long and short. You can manage a few that way. A giant stack would be pretty impossible to manage with your hand, but definitely a few is achievable. And you can take it a little bit further. Just as an example, you could create expression here. I'll use left and right, and I will send an expression pedal message with that. So that you can see I'm now controlling left and right is this, up and down is this. So I can try to do both of those at the same time. To make it a little easier on myself, I will tune this rule a little bit. I'll clamp down the motion range so it's not all the way to the bottom and not all the way to the top, so it's kind of more comfortable area. And I will also stabilize it a little bit. This means that the actual articulation is a little bit behind the movement of my hand, but it takes away kind of the small wiggles because it takes a little bit of an average of your hand position. So I'll do that and see if I can play with a little bit more, a little bit of the expression included. So it gives you control over a fairly simple instrument, just with a few articulations and some expression pedal. You can get some much more interesting playing than you could get without.